There are towns in America where the streetlights no longer come on, where you can stand in the center of what used to be Main Street and hear nothing but wind through empty structures. This isn't about ghosts. It's about the slow erasure of places built with permanence in mind, then abandoned with bureaucratic efficiency. Towns are poisoned by their own industries, communities dissolved by federal order, populations that dwindled to single digits. If this unsettles you, subscribe. We're descending through 10 locations that exist in the margins, places you can visit but shouldn't stay. Let's begin. Number 7. Picher, Oklahoma. Population, 0. The ground is full of lead, and the air carries dust from mountains of mining waste called chat piles. For most of the 20th century, Picher was one of the world's most productive lead and zinc mining towns. By the 1990s, it was one of the most toxic. Testing revealed 34% of local children had lead poisoning. Buildings collapsed into unmapped mine shafts without warning. The EPA designated it a Superfund site. In 2008, a tornado destroyed much of what remained. The federal government offered buyouts. By 2013, the town was officially dissolved. What remains? Empty streets, foundations, and the chat piles, glowing faintly orange, shifting in the wind. Fewer than 10 people refused to leave, living in homes surrounded by warning signs. One resident described returning from work to find his street had dropped 4 feet overnight into a mine shaft that had been there, unmapped, for 80 years. You can still walk through Picher. The state of Oklahoma would prefer you didn't. Number 6. Centralia, Pennsylvania. Population, 5. The ground has been on fire since 1962. An underground coal seam ignited and spread through the tunnel network beneath the town. By the 1980s, carbon monoxide seeped into basements. Sinkholes opened, releasing toxic gas. Congress allocated $42 million for relocation. The Postal Service revoked the zip code. The town was condemned. 5 people refused to leave. In 2013, they won a settlement allowing them to live out their lives on the land. They are the last legal residents of a town that no longer officially exists. The fire will burn for another 250 years. The ground is still warm. Steam rises from pavement cracks. One resident asked why she stayed, said she didn't recognize the government's authority to take her home. She described waking to a sulfur smell and checking the basement for new cracks. You don't get used to it. Number 5. Gilman, Colorado. Population, 0, since 1984. A mining town built on a cliff, abandoned by government order. At 8,900 feet, Gilman housed 300 people in the mid-20th century. Miners and families living in narrow terraces carved into the mountain. Mine tunnels extended directly beneath the residential areas. In the 1970s, EPA testing revealed severe groundwater contamination from lead and zinc. The ore body was laced with sulfuric acid. In 1984, residents were ordered to leave. The entire town was fenced off. Gilman still stands. You can see it from Interstate 70, perched on the cliffside, looking inhabited. It's not. Trespassers describe a town frozen in the early 1980s. Calendars on walls, furniture in houses, school desks in rows. The ground remains contaminated. Cleanup has no completion date. It will likely never be safe again. Gilman exists in limbo, too toxic to demolish, too expensive to clean, too visible to forget. Number 4. Glen, Rio. Population, 0. Glen Rio exists on the border between 2 states, which means it exists in neither. Founded in 1903, it thrived as a Route 66 stop in the 1950s and 60s. The Texas Inn stood on the Texas side, the Longhorn Motel in New Mexico. You could sleep in one state, eat in another. Then, Interstate 40 bypassed it. By 1990, the population was 0. What's eerie is how recent it is. People who stopped for gas in the 1960s are still alive. The infrastructure is modern, or was. Electric lines still run along the street. Signs are mid-century Americana, rusted, faded, legible. The state line runs through the center. Neither Texas nor New Mexico claims responsibility. Glen Rio is jurisdictionally nowhere. Stay longer than an hour, and the silence becomes oppressive. No birdsong, no traffic, no indication this place was ever anything but a mistake. Number 3. Monowi, Nebraska. Population 1. The smallest incorporated town in America. The entire population is Elsie Eiler, mayor, clerk, treasurer, and bartender of the only business, the Monowi Tavern. Founded in 1902, Monowi peaked at 150 residents. By 2000, the population was 2, Elsie and her husband Rudy. In 2004, Rudy died. Elsie stayed. She operates the tavern in the summer for tourists. She files municipal reports, pays taxes to herself as treasurer, and allocates funds as mayor. The town has a library, Rudy's 5,000 books in a small building she maintains. The rest is empty, 4 or 5 buildings in decay, gravel streets, uninhabited houses. Elsie is in her 80s. When she dies, Monowi ceases to be incorporated. The state will absorb it. The town will be erased administratively, then physically. Visitors describe drinking at the tavern as deeply strange. You're served by the town's only resident, surrounded by miles of empty farmland. The conversation is friendly, but the emptiness becomes oppressive. You're not visiting a town. You're visiting a woman who refuses to admit her town is dead. Number 2. McMurdo Station, Antarctica. Population, approximately 1,000, summer. Approximately 250, winter. McMurdo Station is not in America, but it is America. Operated by the United States Antarctic Program under the National Science Foundation, McMurdo is the largest settlement in Antarctica and functions as a logistics hub for research across the continent. It's technically a U.S. government facility under the jurisdiction of the Antarctic Treaty, which means it exists in a legal gray area, a place governed by American bureaucracy but outside American geography. McMurdo has roads, buildings, a harbor, a power plant, a fire station, a store, a post office, and a bar. During summer, the population exceeds 1,000. During winter, it drops to around 250 people who are cut off from the outside world for 8 months. The sun sets in April and doesn't rise again until August. Temperatures drop to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. The last flight out leaves in February. If you miss it, you're staying until October. The isolation is psychological more than physical. McMurdo is a functional town. People work, eat, socialize, and sleep in a structured environment. But the environment is hostile in a way that precludes casual existence. You cannot leave the station without authorization and proper gear. You cannot go for a walk. You cannot escape the presence of the 249 other people you're locked in with. Winter personnel describe a phenomenon called T3 syndrome, a psychological decline that occurs in the 3rd trimester of winter isolation, characterized by depression, irritability, and cognitive impairment. The condition is well documented. The National Science Foundation screens for it. It still happens. McMurdo is also the site of the continent's only ATM, a single machine operated by Wells Fargo that services personnel with U.S. bank accounts. There's something deeply unsettling about the presence of consumer banking infrastructure in a place where money is nearly useless, where survival depends on federal logistics, and where the nearest alternative civilization is 2,000 miles away across an ocean that freezes solid. The station has a coffee shop called The Galley, a bar called Southern Exposure, and a small store that sells snacks and souvenirs. But the products are shipped in once a year. If the supply chain fails, there is no resupply until the next ship arrives. During World War II, a similar station ran out of food. Personnel survived by hunting seals. McMurdo is unsettling because it's a simulacrum of American normalcy, imposed on the most inhospitable environment on Earth. It's a town that exists because the government decided it should, staffed by people who can't leave, governed by rules designed for a place that doesn't obey human logic. It's not abandoned, it's the opposite, meticulously maintained, continuously occupied, and completely isolated. A self-contained American town at the bottom of the world where the sun disappears for 4 months and the only thing keeping you alive is infrastructure that could fail at any time. Number 1. Point Roberts, Washington. Population 1,191, 2020 census. Point Roberts is a town where you have to leave the country to buy groceries. This is not an exaggeration. Point Roberts is a 4.9 square mile peninsula that extends south from Canada into the waters of Puget Sound. Due to the way the US-Canada border was drawn along the 49th parallel, Point Roberts is geographically part of Canada, but legally part of the United States. It's the northwest corner of Washington state, separated from the rest of America by 20 miles of Canadian territory. To reach Point Roberts from the US, you must cross into Canada, drive through the city of Delta, British Columbia, then cross back into the US at the Point Roberts border station. This requires a passport. Both crossings are subject to customs inspection, security delays, and the possibility of denial of entry. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the border closed. Point Roberts was cut off from the rest of the United States entirely. Residents could not access medical care, purchase goods, or reach jobs without violating border restrictions. The population dropped to around 300. Point Roberts has no hospital, no grocery store, no pharmacy. The nearest services are in Canada, which residents can access more easily than American facilities, but doing so requires crossing an international border twice every time they need milk. Mail delivery is domestic, but packages are routed through Canada, adding days to shipping times. 911 services are provided by Canadian emergency responders under a mutual aid agreement. The town exists primarily as a location for summer vacation homes owned by Canadians, who can reach it without crossing an international border. The year-round population is small, aging, and increasingly desperate for federal intervention. Proposals to cede Point Roberts to Canada or create a special border exemption have been floated for decades. None has succeeded. Residents describe a peculiar kind of claustrophobia. The town is surrounded by water on 3 sides and Canada on the 4th. You can't leave without permission from a foreign government. You can't access your own country without leaving it first. You live in America, but America is somewhere else. During the pandemic, the U.S. Coast Guard delivered supplies by boat. Residents organized supply runs across the border under humanitarian exemptions, each trip requiring hours of coordination and approval. The local school, which serves fewer than 30 students, nearly closed because teachers couldn't cross the border to get to work. Point Roberts is not abandoned. It is not poisoned. It is not declining economically, at least not catastrophically. What makes it the most unsettling town in America is that it reveals the degree to which geography and bureaucracy can trap people in a place that functions nominally but is existentially unlivable. It's a town where national sovereignty creates a border in your daily life, where the accident of a treaty signed in 1846 means that your home is technically in your country, but functionally inaccessible from it, where you are American, but only if you can prove it to Canada first. Point Roberts is unsettling because it's not a failure of infrastructure, economics, or environmental safety. It's a failure of logic. A place that exists because maps said it should, inhabited by people who stayed because leaving is complicated, governed by a system that acknowledges the absurdity but refuses to fix it. It's the creepiest town in America because it's a town that shouldn't exist, occupied by people who know it, and defended by a government that won't admit it. The most disturbing places in America are not haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by the decisions that created them, the industries that poisoned them, the governments that abandoned them, and the economic forces that rendered them obsolete. These towns exist on maps. They have names, histories, and in some cases, people still living in them. But they've been functionally erased, not by disaster, but by bureaucracy, neglect, and the slow recognition that some places were mistakes. If you found this unsettling, you're not alone. The quiet erasure of communities is one of the least discussed consequences of how we organize space, resources, and policy. It happens slowly, then all at once, and by the time anyone notices, it's too late to reverse. If you want more content like this, long-form, researched, uncomfortable, consider subscribing. There are more stories like these, more towns that exist in the margins, more places where the maps lie. Thanks for watching. And if you live in one of these towns, I hope you're doing okay.